Hi everyone, thank you for joining this meetup for today. Today we're going to be talking about Aspire for .NET developers, and we are going to basically be talking about building modern distributed application using the Aspire for .NET. Um, I have on this session 𝗗𝗃𝗶𝗿𝗄, is an Microsoft MVP, which will be taking us through the Aspire for .NET today. Um, Also, we have partners and also we have some companies that are actually supporting us for this particular event. We are fully part of .NET Foundation now. They accepted us I think last week. So we are part of .NET Foundation fully. We have JetBrain license, should in case, because we are partner with JetBrain, should in case you need JetBrain license, you can actually reach out. We have few licenses that we can give out. Then I think at the end of, I don't know how I want to handle this. Should in case there's questions at the end of the presentation, I think we can all ask the question. But I'm going to, sorry, let me add a few more people in. So I'm going to give the mic to Isaiah now to kickstart this session fully for us. Thank you everyone for joining. I hope we're going to enjoy this particular session. I'm actually looking forward to it because I want to use Aspire, like I said, in production. I've not used it. So it's actually one of the sessions I've been looking at. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for also having me. As I said, that this is a great opportunity for us to meet and learn about .NET. I really love .NET, and I think it was a game changer for me when my boss introduced me to .NET. And before I start, I would like to even give a little story about how I got to know .NET. So way back in university, we used to do Microsoft event, right? So I was a Microsoft student ambassador, and what I was doing is I was focusing on React, Microsoft Azure, and other tools. So there was this event that we had, and then my guy came in to present about .NET. He was talking about how we can you can build a full stack application with .NET, and then I was happy because seeing the code, and I was doing Node.js, and Node.js was kind of stressful because the Express.js was easy. And for me, I don't like something that is easy because when the code base grows, it becomes complicated too. So when I saw that code base, I said, no, I want to learn this thing. So in the evening, he sent me a link to download .NET, Visual Studio, everything. I started. So that was a breakthrough for me. And, when I was doing it, at a point, I was like, oh, this is interesting. So let's try to see how people can also learn this technology. So then, in the Microsoft space, I was trying to help people to learn .NET. I mean, and all that after school, I joined a company while we're using .NET. So I've been then talking about .NET and Microsoft. Um, gave me this .NET MVP that but it's because of the community. I mean, we are all mostly doing this together, but the support from the community members, and anytime we do something, they showed up. And then anytime I will write a blog post or I'll do a YouTube video, somebody will say, okay, this is interesting. I'm learning a lot and all that. And sometimes it's also good to meet people and then learn together, right? So basically, my name is 𝗗𝗃𝗶𝗿𝗄, Microsoft .NET MVP right here, right? So we're gonna talk about .NET. I mean, I'm always happy with anything related to .NET, right? But this time around, what we're gonna do is that this is going to be interesting kind of stuff. It's a conversation we are going to have, right, about how you are using it and how you can use it. So before, let me go ahead trying to see if I can share my screen. I'm not that PowerPoint person, but forgive me. Right? We have to put out something, and then we have to then yeah. So let's talk about let's start with the idea of how we mostly work with. Hey, back in the days, we used to work with Docker, right? And the idea of Docker was that, hey, there's a couple of services that I want to use it locally, right? Connect to my application and do some testing. But, I don't want to use production or provision database and try that. So locally, I want to do something. And Docker is saying that, hey, then I'm going to give you an image. Then you pull that, you connect to your application, and then you use that. So those of us who have been using Docker all this while, you have your Docker file that can build your application. So one thing is that you have different applications in .NET. Let's say you have a solution and then you have different projects in that solution. Basically, you want to build them together, or you want to have this environment where you can move your code to any environment that you want. So Docker is helping you to do this container thing. And one thing is that you have your Docker Compose, and then in there you can then, put some images and trying to see, okay, I have multiple Docker file. This Docker Compose should build it, or I want to have Postgres. I want to have this MongoDB. I want to have this image. So that was very painful because it at a point it was like a DevOps kind of stuff, right? Because I think all this YAML file and spin up Docker. If you don't even have a strong machine, sometimes it's gonna get stuck and all that. But what happened with Microsoft is that the goal was that they want to help .NET developers to build something locally, right? And later on, pick the same environment, push it into Microsoft Azure, right? Right now, as far as it's available in most places like Microsoft, AWS, they are trying their best. But, the best environment that you might even run it for production works is going to be like Microsoft Azure, right? And that is what the goal, of this thing can be. So they have a nice website. Now when you look at it, the website is very nice. When it started, it was really bad, right? And what we have here is that this is basically the whole story. So this is, as I said, when it started, it was a .NET Aspire thing that you can see, like it was a .NET. Right now, it's not only .NET, right? So if you are here and you are not even doing .NET, you are doing something like TypeScript, Node.js, you are doing Python and all that. You can still use this too, right? Because it's kind of a cross-platform that they are trying to do, because everybody is facing the same issue where they want to build a full stack or they want to spin up a service. So this is basically the website, and getting started is kind of easy. But one thing that I want to say before we start is that whenever you are running Aspire, you still need Docker. And behind the scene, as I said, we used to have an idea of infrastructure as a code. So your cloud infrastructure can be in a code, right? Where you provision everything by writing code. So whenever you deploy, automatically it's going to create those environments for you, right? So basically now where we are with this .NET Aspire is that all this YAML or all this Docker or container configuration that we want to do, we can then do that by using code, right? And behind the scene, the Docker will then take it up and then it will run everything for us. So we are going to get this output where Docker will run it. But we don't need to understand all this YAML files and everything. We need to understand C# or TypeScript and write everything in it, and Docker will do the work. So you need Docker to run this, right? The whole idea is that behind the scene, you don't need to understand what the YAML file and everything. You just need to understand what you want. You want Postgres or you want Agile Blob Storage or whatever you want, and then it will be able. So you can. There is this concept of the CLI. They have a CLI that you can use to run your application. You can install that, and I think most of us that use .NET CLI. .NET New and all that, right? And mostly you have the EF core to also install where you want to run migration. These are the same concept where you have something globally installed, then you use that to run your thing. So when you have that, you basically can use Aspire run, and then the CLI will spin whatever project you want to run. It's like you having a Node.js running or you have .NET installed, right? So basically, it's very simple. I'm going to show you the code, how you can work with it and everything. But I just want to show you how this works. So the thing is that this is not basically for only .NET, right? As I said, this is basically for every tool. And anytime that there is a new update, the website is very nice. I love the website and they have extensions as well. So if you're using VS Code, you probably would then be able to install the extension, and then you get, whenever you have extension in VS Code, you get all these highlights and everything it helps you to then work around VS Code. So this is how it's going to look in VS Code. But those .NET folks, we mostly love Visual Studio, right? But what is happening is that because Visual Studio is an IDE, they have built this thing inside, right? But VS Code, you need extension before you can run most of it. But you can even build it without extension, but it's better to have the Aspire extension installed in VS Code so that you can get some kind of auto suggest and then code highlights and everything that will help you. So one thing I want to establish here is that this is not basically .NET 2 only, right? This is a tool for TypeScript, Python, and I think they are doing Java as well. They have Java as well. And what is happening is that these are some of the integration you can do. You can do data, you can do cloud providers and all that. So as I said, they are still working on AWS to make sure that you can then integrate to AWS. So this is some of the distributed card. You can do all these things here. You can do this Docker, you can deploy here. So databases, you can spin up all these databases locally. Aspire will do the thing for you. And behind the scenes, using Docker. So let's get to the slides and let's see how we have a conversation on how this thing works, right? So this is basically oh, sorry, my slides are duplicated, right? So basically, what we are going to cover is that, as I said, Aspire is basically you trying to test most of things locally, but it doesn't mean that you can't take it to production, right? You can take it to production as well, and then it's easy to do that with Microsoft Azure as we speak, right? But AWS, Google Cloud, and everything, they are still working on it to make sure that it works fine, right? And the idea is very simple. You have your code, and it's not about you trying to provision Postgres. It's about, having other, you see, as I said, let's say if you have different projects and you wanted to talk to each other, basically you're going to have this Docker file, Docker compose thing. It's a lot of work, right? But here is very easy to then work around with just one configuration, right? With the app host, you do the configuration, and then you say that the system have a reference to this, it can talk to this, right? So, as I said, it has a command line that you can use. It has a CLI that you can use. And Microsoft is basically looking at AI agent as well. So whenever you have, you are going to have a dashboard. One thing about this Aspire thing that is more interesting is that local development sometimes is kind of hard, right? But you'll be able to have these logs to see how your application behaves. When somebody make a request, how does it come in and how, it works and everything. So you see most of the things, which if you are using something like a Docker Compose and all this thing, you will not get, you need to go and bring in some, another kind of logs, library, and then trying to figure things out and all that. By default, you have this. So as we're discussing about, is it this, this production ready? Whenever you want to deploy this to production, is this something that you can depend on and all that? Yes, you can deploy this to production. When it came in initially, it was just a testing. You can use it for testing and all that. But whenever you want to deploy, I'm going to show you how you provision most of the things you need. Automatically, the Azure CLI will create all the services that is you have this, provision. So let's say we have Postgres, we have Agile Blob Storage, we have this kind of RabbitMQ and all that. Whenever we want to deploy it, it's going to create that one for us. We want to create those services, right? And then we'll be able to then use that. So production is easy, just one command line, and then you'll be able to deploy this into a production application, right? And these are some of the things that will probably, you see, you basically run an application, right? And then the issue is that you need to start different. I think .NET, you can then have different, you can build a solution, you can have web API, and then you have others as a class library, and then the first application or the gateway will be like the API application. So you run and all the application runs and all that. But this Aspire solve those issues. So all the application can work together, even with Blazor frontend, right? And as I said, if you are running Node.js and you are running React, you can also do the same, where all the application is running together like that. So you can make a request and then it goes to the back end. You don't need to go and start the front end and you're going to start the back end and all that. Just run the Aspire and all of them will run together, just like a one application running, right? And you have a dashboard, which I'm going to show you how you can also navigate the dashboard with the AI and all that. And it's really hard. And then you probably, most cases, do connection string and all that, put all this configuration, everything. Now you're going to do this configuration as a code, right? This is amazing. And then the system will be able to talk to each other like that, right? So just one configuration with the app host, and you can take it everywhere. And let's say one advantage is that we are working as a team, right? And then you have all this configuration. And the moment I put the code, run it, all of them will be spin up. I don't need to do anything. So one configuration for the whole team members to be able to work around it. So somebody adds something and then it will work for everybody, and without you going and trying to re-add things and all that. And you have logs. As I said, it's very, very interesting to have all this log to trace and see how things are going and all that. So all these things are there with this dashboard. And the dashboard is amazing, right? It's very lovely to see how your application is doing, right? So you don't need to, and most of these things are something that they have built behind the scene, right? For you. So your goal is just to run it and see how you can stop one application and you can start one application. And if one depends on each other, the other one will wait before this one will start and all that. So basically, as I said, it's a code first, right? You write your code for the configuration and before it will then spin up. So we add Postgres, we add RabbitMQ, we add Agile Blob Storage into our app host, which I'm going to show you. And then automatically it then going to spin up for you, right? So you first of all going to write this as a code, and then secondly, it then going to spin up for you, right? So that is the whole concept here. You are writing all this configuration as a code, right? And behind the scene, it will do all the work for you, right? And as I said, it's kind of multi-language now. There's a lot of languages that is supported, but the most interesting one is C# and TypeScript, and that is, the other ones are good, but I have not tried, my hands on most of them though. But experience with it when it comes to C# and TypeScript is really amazing, right? So you can do your React and your Node.js, and you can do your you can even do your React and .NET. We used to even have .NET and React templates in Visual Studio, right? Where you then spin up and then it's gonna run, but it was even a heavy kind of a template like that. So this is how I want to show you this, right? So without Aspire, this is most of the case. This is what you do, right? So basically, you have your Postgres running. You're gonna spin it up, but as I said, this is where you're gonna do it in the command and run it independently. But you can solve this issue with Docker Compose, right? That was the idea for Docker Compose to come and then trying to help us to run some kind of the services in there. But with Aspire, is as I said, it's kind of a code. You have to go in there trying to, so this just add a Postgres database for us, right? So just add a Postgres database, and then we just say that, hey, this Postgres database we are adding a reference to this API project. That is all we need to do, right? You don't need to go and spin up these connections. I mean, it has a reference to it. So behind the scene, it will do all the work for you. And then you can also then add the front end project, right? You see that, hey, this front end project is also part of this. Then that kind of where you have to connect this and everything is with just this simple C# code, you have everything configured. And if you have the CLI, you're going to do Aspire run and then it's going to run. But mostly, some of us, you prefer to use the Visual Studio, which does a lot of work for you as well. So we just have to go ahead and then run your Visual Studio, and then everything will run for you, right? Which I will demonstrate for us to go through in that one. So one thing is that it's easy to have a resources setting up, right? And this relationship between the application and the services that you are adding, right? There is this kind of relationship that you don't need to worry about because you can do it easy, you know. So back in the days where you are trying to connect your back end to the front end and it's not working, sometimes so the route is not, all these things were very stressful to do, right? So here you just have them, and then each one of them is talking to each other. Just a simple TypeScript or Python or C# code like that. So it's kind of interesting to have all these databases. You can spin up all these databases and have all this environment to have one execution, right? Run all your applications or app. So this Aspire thing came in. As I said, we started using this from version 1 where we were building some microservices, and it was very painful for us to try these things out. So this is a scenario. Microservices where we have most of the services are independent, right? They are doing their own thing and it talks to each other. But so before I will be able to run the complete flow, all the services need to run. So we're looking at, okay, then Aspire was like, okay, when we run, we can then add all the projects together and it will run all of them together. So when I logged in, the authentication service would then send the whatever information that I'm sending to the authentication service. It will send to all the other services that need to know. Then I'll be able to log in. I can make payments and everything. So if I want to make payments, the payment service needs to be running, and then the auth service needs to run it so that I can log in. So Aspire helps you to have this one execution where you just run it in the dashboard. You see all the services running. So you see that, okay, your payment service is not healthy, and then there is something wrong with it. When you make the request, this happen and all that. So I always say that it's a tool that it's a must. It's a tool that you must use to understand what is happening, within your application, right? So that even when you go to production and you are using Docker or other kind of things, then it will be easy for you to know where things are. Where things are, right? When you want to configure things or want to look at things. So it's kind of easy, right? So it helps you to compose the code. You deploy the same model. As I said, it had this kind of because it's related to Docker. Behind the scene, at the end of the day, it's Docker, but we are trying to abstract that one for you to use code to do that, right? And then you can use to do debug, work across multiple languages. And now there is an AI agent to even tell you based on your logs that, hey, this is what is happening here right now, right? So it's kind of interesting. So for me, and now it has Aspire skills. It has MCP server that you can connect to get more information to run your application for the AI. And then this Microsoft is more focused on AI nowadays, so they cannot build a product that it does not support AI, right? But it depends on your use cases. You might not even use the AI for most of these cases, but if you want, you can then go ahead and use it as well. But it's there for you in case you want to use it as well, right? So basically, that is how, and these are some of the MCP stuff that you probably would then trying to do the AI stuff, which I'm much interested in. But if you want to learn it well, you might not basically even, focus on much of the AI. So that is basically it. I've been talking a lot about AI and all these things. So let's look at this. I hope my screen is clear right here. So let's look at this. I built a simple to-do application for us to look at how this is going to work. Now, this is where it gets interesting. This is very simple application right here. It's not doing anything. It's just a to-do, no kind of a logic. But what is happening is that those of us with a Visual Studio, when you go in here, you probably see that we have like a four project, right? So when you check our solution right here, it's saying that, hey, you have 4 solutions here. So if I check here, you see that this is like 4 solutions, right? 4 projects in the solution. I would say 4 solutions. Now, the first one is what we call the web API. So this is the web API, and I have this DB contest, right? Kind of simple DB contest. I have a controller here. I have this to do here. So this is like a normal kind of maybe web API that you have been creating and all that, right? .NET code and all that. Now, so this is the web API. Now, we need to show something to the UI, which I'm using Blazor here. So this is also the kind of the Blazor app as well, right? So we are trying to then make the calls to the endpoints here. So this is like a service where it gets it, do the delete and everything, right? So it's trying to use this HTTP client right here. So you see the HTTP client here. It's not pointing to any route. Let me do this. We are in Aspire for you to understand what. Now, in a normal application that we used to do, right? All we do is that you have where your port, your endpoint. The endpoint is basically run. Let's say in this case, it's going to be a local host, right? So it's going to be a local host, and then you say that local host / whatever. That's what you use because that is where your API is running. And now you see here, those of us with the HTTP client, what's happening with the HTTP client is that is what you use to make an API calls to external kind of application, right? In .NET. I think Angular has the same idea as well. So now, with the base address, we are saying that hey, HTTP with app service instead of a port. And the reason is that I'm going to show you why we are doing that and why Aspire is, giving us, exposing this, and then we'll be able to connect to it as well. So as I said, the front end is connecting to the back end with just these simple lines of code right here without any kind of when the port change and everything because they are together. So they are connected in the app host. So this is basically some of the components here is just layout thing. And then this is Blazor code. Maybe you don't like it. Most of us don't like it, but it's always good to work around it, right? So those of us, maybe this is your first time seeing this Blazor thing here. So think about it as like, React. We have React as a library or Angular as a front-end framework where it will help you to do front-end stuff, right? So in C#, you can also build a whole front-end application without React using this Blazor right here. And most applications that mostly you see, sometimes you use Blazor, right? Even especially in Microsoft environment. This is their front-end tool that they use to build. And it has this concept of React and this HTML thing use. And you can use something like CSS, but it's complicated now. So you use the concept like a bootstrap kind of things, but you can use your own CSS also for it, right? So this is basically I've defined classes and then have all these CSS for it. And then you write whenever you say code, and then you write the C# logic. So you are basically doing the C# and the UI together. That is what Blazor mostly give you. It's very interesting. So if you know C#, you don't need to learn something like React. You can then use the C# knowledge to work with this UI framework, right? So basically, that is what I have here, and this is a global import. And if this is React, we're gonna have like index.ts or JS, right? Which means that when the moment we import this, it's gonna be like something like that. But this is a kind of a global import that makes sure that everything is available in other places. And as I said, this is basically using the Bootstrap, right? By default, it's trying to use a Bootstrap, and I have my own app.cs that is trying to use as well. So enough about this one. So now let's get into the point. Now we have our API, we have our Blazor front end, but what is happening is that we then have what we call this. Most cases whenever you see aspired service default, you might not go in there and edit most of the code because maybe unless it's something you want to customize, because this is the code that is there for you, right? It's up to you by default. That is there, but it's kind of a default thing that they have added for you, right? And then you are going to add, because as I said, it's a kind of a dashboard giving you logs. So they need to do that one for you. But so the service default, you only edit it. Maybe you want to do some customization, which is not likely what you want to do. Now, where you are going to spend your time here is what we call the app host. So let's have this scenario where I have a Docker file, I have a Docker compose. Docker compose, if I have multiple Docker file, Docker compose then can run it for me, right? So that is basically, so the Docker compose become the entry point of everything. But with this one, the app host also does the entry points for us. So now the app host, this is how it look like. And as I said, we have this is here. It's helping us just to define like database, right? So if you are to use Docker, you're going to look for Docker images, and sometimes so this here is a Postgres, the database, and then we are saying that, hey, add Postgres, right? And then Aspire, we are telling Aspire that, hey, add Postgres, and behind the scene, this is the code that they are writing for you. So you could see that it has Docker, right? It has this Docker multiple, it has this Postgres, or it has this Postgres DB. So you could see that they are doing the work behind the scene for you. And it's trying to also use this, which is a this with the entity framework called, this is the provider for the Postgres, right? They are trying to also use that. So you see that if you go through this code, this is what they are trying to do. They are trying to open a connection, and they have this database for Postgres right here. So now, this is a code that's basically going to talk to Docker, right? To spin up a Postgres for you. But what you are doing here is that you are just calling it here and say that, hey, I want to spin up Postgres, and this will do it for you. And behind the scene, this is the work that they are doing for you, right? So you don't need to basically think about the connection, how it's connecting and everything. But as I said, if you want to learn more, as our goal is to understand, the best ways to understand is to step into the code and see what they are doing, right? And so when the moment you understand this method, add Postgres, you see why they are doing it in such a way that, so it's basically a C# code. So you can then go through all the code and understand why they are doing it that way. And it will even help you to then understand Docker more, right? So you see that they're even using an event and all that, right? So this is a simple way of doing it, right? They are giving you all these things so that you don't need to do it yourself, right? And there was this add database. Generally, you have add database. Postgres have this PG admin where the UI you can do that. So they are also writing that one here. And they are checking it in the browser. It's going to be HTTP. The target port is going to be port 80. So basically they are doing this for you. So you then run it and then it's gonna run for you. So most of the services are here, wait for apples and all that. So most of the things that you're gonna use is already defined here. So your goal is to go to the app host, which is here, and say that, hey, I want a PostgreSDB, right? And now this is the PostgreSDB that you have. And you say that, hey, I want to have the data volume, right? So that this will help you to persist. And in the Docker Compose, you're probably gonna do the same, right? Docker Compose is gonna do the same, but here is just a method you are trying to call, right? So if you come here and you check, you see it gets the directory right here. So this is how in Postgres, basically, this is how you in Docker Compose, this is mostly how you do it, right? So you see that it's a concept of Docker that they are trying to combine that one so that it becomes easy for you to work around it. So your goal is to just go ahead and get to work and not, be thinking of how to do all these things yourself. But it's not the best way is also not going in there and be using it without understanding it. So you can then step through all the method and understand why they are doing this and how they are doing this and how why this is working this way and why this is working this way. So basically, you can add this as a, so I said, okay, I want to add a PG admin. So here, if we go here, right here, we can then check what are some of the available method that we can use. So you could see that these are some of the things we can use. We can publish container, publish connection string on retry and wait for start, right? So basically, when now we have our database created here, then we are telling Aspire that, okay, then this is a database already created for us. We add the database. And you see that this is also another method that is here that help us to add the database as well, right? And then, then this becomes our database. So you see that here, we are saying that to do DB. So now, anytime we want to reference our database, we are looking for to do DB, right? That becomes our DB, right? So, and then this is add a project. We can add a multiple project. So that's what I said. You can add multiple projects, right? So if you have different projects, you then have to add them, and then you can then indicate that this depends on this. So when you see that the project that we are adding here, we say Aspire, we are saying that, hey, this is an API service. And you remember in our web, all we are doing is that, hey, the HTTP is targeting the API service. The moment it gets scan and find the API service, it knows about where, the port that is running on and everything. So we don't need to worry about that. So now our services here is called the API service. That is what we are using, right? So this become our API service, and we check for the 8 health status as well. And then this is our DB. Now, the interesting part is that this one that we are doing here is that we are trying to add a reference between the DB and then the API, right? So now let's think of it, if it is Postgres or other DB, what we normally do is that we then have to pack the connection string and then bring it in, right? And then we connect it to it and then trying to have this I configuration and trying to do all these things and all that. Now, we say that with the project reference, what is happening is that the reference in here is basically adding up. But now, when we add a reference, one thing that, somebody's saying that it's like a wrapper around Docker. Yeah, so that is basically when we say that infrastructure as code, right? And you write your bicep, and you can deploy your bicep into Azure, and then it will provision the Azure resources for you, right? So this is like that. You are writing your code and C#, but behind the scene is like it's doing the Docker work for you, right? So all the configuration that you need to do, right? The YAML file in Docker, and here is trying to do it using C#. Right. So you don't need to be an expert or DevOps guy to know that you need to put this here, put there. The moment you understand C#, then you'll be able to then arrange how you want your Docker to operate. So let's, as you said, the wrapper at the end of the day is going to output um, something like a Docker for you, right? So what we are saying is that, hey, we have a reference, we have added a reference to our DB, right? And then the moment you run this application, wait for the DB. If the DB is not available, then you cannot run because we depend on the DB. So this method here is that wait for. It means that if the DB is not healthy, then it means that the API service will not run. And I think in the Docker environment, this is mostly the issue that you're gonna have where some of the services are run. I mean, your Postgres is not running, or this service that you added is not running. So due to that, application is not connecting to it. And then you need to go and figure it out and see that, hey, when it builds, it fails, the retry and everything. That is very painful, right? So here, you have to go ahead and say, hey, add this kind of wait for. So it means that we need to wait for this to be available before you can also then kick in, right? So now, that is how it works. And they say, okay, we also want to add a front-end application. These are just a 2 applications. Imagine we have 3 or 4 applications. It's going to be easy for us. So we are saying that, hey, this is also front-end. We want to have this external endpoint, right? So, there's going to be an endpoint. So when you go through this, you see how it's trying to work. It's trying to get this annotation and trying to find either HTTP or HTTPS. Because as I said, all of them are going to work together. So it's going to scan and then find this endpoint annotation. So one thing is that you can always step through, try to understand what they are trying to say, right? And that is basically how you probably also understand it. And the code is always available. Even the whole thing is an open source. If you want to understand more, you can pull it and then go through and understand it. And then we also do the health check. Now, another thing we are doing is that, hey, add a reference. So the front-end application is now depending on the backend. So now, before you add a reference so that we know that, hey, there's this relationship between the front end and the back end. So we say that, hey, add a reference, right, to the API service, which we created here, right? And then it's going to add it. So it's, hey, now we are together, right? I have a reference with you so that now I can get some of your services. I can get them from you. And then we are saying that, hey, because you depend on the back end, if the back end is not running, wait for it. You not just go and also run. Wait for it as well. So if the backend is not available, then it means that you need to wait. You are not going to run and say that, hey, there was an error. We tried to connect and it didn't work and all that, right? So basically, you have a different projects, different services. That is how you're going to add them. Now, let's kick in and see how the dashboard and everything is going to look like, right? So when we run that, as I said, it's running the app host, right? The app host is what is running. So there is a service running already. There is a service running already, which we need to stop. So, oh God. It's not going to run. It's not going to run. Visual Studio. Because you can see that here. Where was it? Oh God. So that is one downside about Visual Studio. Right? There was this running. Oh. I was running this before. It's running here. I need to stop it. I'm coming. So that is Postgres. Yeah. Okay. So I want to run it so that you see how how the dashboard look like, right? But it's not running because okay. I think I'm running this in a CLI. So it still depends on Docker.
Maybe you should close the Visual Studio and the terminal and reopen it.
Yeah, the terminal, you know, I think I ran it once and I don't know, the process is still running. This is how the dashboard is going to look like, by the way, but I wanted to run it. But what he's saying is that I don't even see the, when it's running, I don't see these things well. Again, he's saying that let's do it. It cannot access the process, right? Because it's being used by another process. Is that the thing is? So that is one thing that is running. I'm trying to find it so that I'll stop it from here. But okay, let's check the container. Okay.
Oh, I think you can just use the one that is already running to continue the demo.
Yeah, but it's that one. Yeah. This is I'm trying to stop this Docker thing. Docker desktop. So as I said, you still need a Docker to run this thing. So you're gonna kick in. You see, it's still running, as I said. But by the way, some of the services is trying to say that. Okay, let me see if this will start. Right, it's running on healthy right here. So one thing about is that you can stop it, right, and start it again, right? So now you see it's running. You can, so this is the dashboard that you are going to get, right? So basically everything that you are going to spin up, you're going to see them here, right? So you're going to see them here. And then what you can do is that you can then trying to stop. I can stop, let's say I can stop Postgres, right? And I can start it without going back to my machine and restart the thing. But it doesn't mean that when you make changes, you can then come and restart it here and it will work. You need to restart the whole application, right? I think one of my colleagues was trying to do that, where anytime he makes changes, he come here and stop this and restart it, right? Thinking that, okay, it's supposed to reflect here. I think they have not implemented that functionality yet. It's going to be hard though. But so now you see that under Postgres, we have our DB. And then under our application, you could see that when our application is running, and this ones, we can see if our API, you see, is running, right? And when we go back here, we want to check what is the issue. So it's good that there is an exception, right? So this is an exception. So you see that you have these logs here that will help you to then see how things are looking like, So you have all these logs here and you see that. So if you have multiple applications, you'll be able to then see that this is, and the rest is just how you can then switch to another application. So I can switch to the front end here without going back, right? I can switch to all the Postgres, and you see that the Postgres is also running, right? And then you can see that we have this pgadmin here, and then it's also running, right? So all these services that we have added here will be able to do all these things. And there is this trace that you'll be able to trace all these things and see what is happening right here. So it just helps you to then see what is happening. So if you make a request, you'll be able to see all these things here and how it came in. It was a get from the server. Was a response. So it gives you all these things locally. And I think there's no tool that can help you to have more insights about your application like this, right? Before you even put it into production. So this is basically, you don't have any metrics here. So let's say with the app services, you're gonna get all this and you see how it's running, right? So this is basically, you can see the pool right here. So there is more that you can see about, the performance by your application and how it's doing and everything, right? Then you have this structure logs as well. There is a difference between the trace here, and then there is the difference between the structure log. As I think when it says structure log, this give you the logs. The trace, we can think of it as where we want to see how things came in from specific kind of stuff. So that's why you see all these things. So it's really, really interesting to do it that way. And you stop, and the UI is something that they keep on building, and there's something that they keep on changing. So today you might come and then the AI is the interface is like this, and tomorrow you see a different interface as well. So let's go to the dashboard. So now all these things are running, and then you could see that it's giving us the URL, and we can go and say that we want to run this in HTTPS. So this is basically our to-do application, right? And it's connected to the backend by default. We don't need to do anything. So I can go and say that I want to create a new thing. So I can say test, right? And I create this, and then I can say the to-do. This to-do is also for test to do, right? And then I can add this. And then, so you see, we have this Postgres database now trying to do this. We can say that, hey, I want to complete this. Don't worry about this. This is the Blazor kind of a UI, right? Or it's, as I said, it's a front end framework, so you have to use it for most of this thing. So this is running back end and front end together with Aspire. With the database, with we don't need to then worry about going and create provision database and all that. And as I said, you have a wonderful dashboard that you can then use to trace how your application is working, the logs and everything. So when we go to the trace right here, and then we go to which is the app service right here. So you see that this is our the to do, and this is how we are doing it. We did a get, and then whenever there is an issue, you see that it's trying to connect it, and you see the issues as well. And it's even give you a time that all these things happen and all that. So locally, if you are getting this to see how your application is doing, I think it's amazing, right? So basically, it solves a lot of issues for you. You don't need to go to production and then before you see. So even if you have 20, and one thing that they added is the graph. I really like this graph thing. This one, it helps you to then understand how the application is talking to each other, right? So you see that this one, what we have here, how is it talking to each other, right? When I click on this, it then tells me that, hey, this service talk to the web front end, and it talk to the to-do, right? So imagine you have 20 applications, you just join the team or whatever, and you don't understand how the application talk to each other. You can then use this graph to then see how all these services talk to each other, right? Which is amazing, interesting. That. So it also helps you to learn. Here you don't have any perimeter that you want to add, but this is interesting. And then you will see that, okay, it's running, is it healthy, and all that, right? So it's there's lots that you can do. If I'm to speak, I'll even say more things about it. It's really, really nice, right? And I love it. So mostly I just use it to say that, okay, these guys are doing well, right? It's really nice. So you see that you can do all these things, right? You can do all these things, and then you can do all these structure logs, and you can do all these trees and all that. So basically, that is how you want to basically try to use this, right? It's interesting, and it's amazing to then have all these things inside and then work around it. So locally, it's giving you this environment to then do a lot of things, right? And they have a Zoom, right? Don't worry about this. Why I click on this? Yeah. So I think this is what I would say for now. And it's interesting. It's open source, so you can just go and see how people are doing it. This is the repo. So it's just small now, is growing small, but it's really nice. So here you can then learn more about it as well, go through it code base and understand how it's also gonna go. You can add the MCP as well from here, and then you'll be able to then also work out. Right. Yeah. So that is what I'll say about Aspire for now. If you have a question and if you have something you want us to discuss, now at this point, let's all have a conversation. How do you see it, and when do you plan to use it, or if you have been using it, what is the interesting part of it that you like? Yeah, I think somebody have a question. There's a hands up.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Isaiah, for this great presentation. I think Okuli. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name very well.
Yeah, Isaiah, right? So my parents believe that I'll be a prophet one day. So that is why they call me Prophet Isaiah, right? I'm also
Okay,
doing
that's
tech
fine.
now. Right? A prophet who is doing tech.
That's fine. So
Anything
we
can happen.
have
Yeah.
one person that raised
Yeah.
his hand.
Yeah.
So please go ahead.
Hopefully. Yeah.
You are muted if you are speaking, please. Okay, I think we can come back. Uh, thank you once again. If there are questions, I think, okay. Can you speak
Hello,
louder?
can anybody?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so I have a couple of questions, right?
Yeah.
Stemming from the use of Aspire. I
Yeah.
joined an organization that already had this set up, like from a newbie to an organization that already had things running. So
Yeah.
Docker wasn't something I was spinning up from
Mm.
scratch. I was aware when Aspire started, considering the fact that I follow some of these MVPs, so it wasn't something I've actually gone into. So number one is if I go fully into Aspire,
Mm.
just that's my first question basically. If I go into Aspire fully, does
Mm.
this mean that somehow, somewhere in the future, DevOps engineers might not necessarily be useful?
Mm.
That's my first question.
Mm. Okay.
Should I
So
proceed without the questions or?
Ask all of them so that I'll
All
answer all
right.
of
The
them.
second one is maybe I didn't see you when you were provisioning the Postgre instance because I was there interested. Like I saw what you were doing that you were adding the DB when you were setting the more or less like how you would want the services to wait for each other, stuff like that. But I
Yeah.
didn't see anything like a connection string whatsoever, nothing. I just saw that you just provisioned the Postgre
Yeah.
service and that was just it. I
Yeah.
think that for anybody would want to bake in some level of control over uh, Postgre that you're setting up or any service that you're setting up. I didn't see that
Mm.
also. I think those are the two first questions. And the third one is, which is more or less like what you displayed. I think I've seen David talk about it many times that if you join the company newly, that Aspire can help you just understand how the whole system works, as opposed to
Yeah.
saying that service A, you have to call service B. So how does that really help? At this screen that you were showing, how does that really help? Because I mean, I joined the system that has almost 11 or 12 microservices, and
Mm.
it took me like over a year to even understand, not even understand, to even have access and then understand how all the microservices even work. So,
Mm.
how does Aspire help in cutting down that knowledge gap or length in learning how all the services speak to each other? So,
Yeah.
those are my three questions. Thank you.
Okay. So let me start from the last one and come back. So now it's good that you said that you have application that has 12 microservices. This is a huge application. And one thing about the whole thing is that if you understand the flow, that is all you need to understand, right? How the flow works. The coding part will be easy for you because then you know that when you do things here, it's happening. So let me now we have we're building a microservices, right? And then in that microservices, we needed to have a gateway. In most cases, you're going to have maybe API gateway that will route most of these things into different microservices, right? And even the gateway, we decided to build different gateways. So we end up, I think, having about 6 or 7. Because what we wanted to do is that it is a different thing that internally we wanted to build some tools and do that. So if somebody join, they won't understand that your first request go to a specific gateway, right? Before it then goes to, so it talks to each other like that. So the moment you understand the flow, you know that if I'm this move from here, it goes here, it goes here, it goes here. And one thing is that even if you know the graph, right, and you look at this, you will see all the applications having a reference to each other like that. So here, this is an independent API service. Don't need to be part of the, but because of the app host, then combining them. So when we are saying the reference, it means that, hey, even database is a different kind of a service somewhere. But because of we are in the app host, I'm trying to make a reference to it to say, hey, I can then have access to you. So even though the microservices are not talking to each other in the programming, or logically, but because we have one app host, the microservices then can then connect to each other, right, in the app host, so that we do logic somewhere because it's connected to each other here. It will then scan and be able to help us. So we don't need to then think about how this is talking to each other or how this is doing. So any microservices, and the second thing is that it helps us to run all the microservices together. Let's say 12 microservices. If you want to run them, because as I said, we have the auth service. Before you log in, auth service need to run, right? You need to maybe go through the some people have some identity server somewhere. It's gonna check all these steps. All these services need to run. So Aspire helps you to run all of them at a time, right? And this graph right here is helping you to know that, okay, this is this does this. And most microservices, sometimes you also have services, right? Like the tools that the microservices are using. For us, we have a whole authentication framework that we have built internally that we use. So it's basically not something outside. But if you have other tools, like as I said, if maybe you have an event-driven stuff, you have a RabbitMQ, you have aka.net, or you have this Kafka thing. All these things, you know that, okay, this application use Kafka. I mean, this payment services depend on this event, because this one connects. So let's say the one that I have here, you see that when I click on this, it tells me that, hey, this application is connected to the front end. So now I know that, okay, this front end is directly connecting to this. Okay, it's also connecting to the database. So now I know different connections, that the backend here, the API service, you can call it any name that you want, but it's connected to the database. So you having all the application in one place, right? And looking at them running, you then understand, first of all the services. And then you all understand all the tools that the database is using, the event or anything, a storage that is using, so that you know about all this, right? Now, one of your questions was depending on these things, that you are not seeing any connection string, right? You are not seeing anything. All we are doing is that. So now, when I was showing it, I was like, no, let's think of this as a Docker. Let's pick from Docker. In the Docker way, we then have a Docker compose to help us to get a Postgres, right? Now, in here, we just have this method, add Postgres. And I was saying that behind the scenes, see what they are doing here. They are trying to add all these resources together, right? So you could see that here, they have this Postgres container image, right? So they have this Postgres container image, which is also here. So you see, right? So the registry is this, the image is this, the tag is this. So when you look at Aspire, it's not something complicated, right? Because they have defined all these things here. It's a constant, right? So what it's going to do is that it's going to pull all these things here. So they are just pulling the image with the image. So behind the scene, it's just pulling Docker image. Because as I said, the image is here. It's just a constant here. They are seeing the image, we are seeing the tag. So if they want to change the version, they just go ahead. Here you can't change it. So you see maybe Postgres 20 or something. There's admin and everything, the web admin. All these things are Docker image behind the scene. Now, because now there is this reference that we are doing here. So we have the Postgres database created here. Then we have this method called add database. Then add the database. So the database can be different database. Remember, it's not only Postgres. You can add MongoDB. You can add MySQL, Microsoft MySQL server and all these things. You can add all those things here. And then the database is added here. But here, this is why we don't have any connection string. Now, the database that we have created here is the database. And then we have added it. So now our database here is to do DB. Because of with reference, now this with the reference method right here, the moment we pass in the DB and say that, hey, this backend service has a reference with this DB, it will do the work behind the scene for us. It will find out that, okay, this is a database, what's connection string? So it then connects it. You don't need to do it yourself. So we are doing it because of this reference, add references. So you could see that, you see what they are trying to do here. They are trying to then have this here. They have the connection string here, right? So you could see that they have the connection string here. So these are kind of connection string, connecting properties, right? So they are doing it for you. They are saying the connection string name, right? So by default, it will then go to the environment and find it for us. So with this reference, add reference with the reference, it will then do all the connection string and everything for us here. So you could see from the code here is that it has all these things in here. So you don't need to do it yourself. And the same thing happens to the front end. You don't need to then have with this one that for the endpoint and everything, because it's also having the reference to the front end. So by default, it has to the front end. But the issue is that with the front end here, we are saying that, hey, because we are using HTTP client, we are saying that, hey, HTTP client, the base URL, we are going to look for the app service, which, so this will scan and find the something from the app host that we call it app service, API service, and then it establish connection with it, right? So behind the scene, it's just a Docker configuration that if not this, you were going to do, but it's making it easy. So even if we have 2 billion, services, we can then define all of them here, make reference to each other, and then you see that the default application we run, that will run the app host, and it will trigger all of them together, right? Now, your last question, DevOps. The whole idea is that at the time that the tech ecosystem is changing, when you talk of DevOps, even the AI now is helping people, backend engineers to deploy applications. But this one basically is helping you as a backend engineer to get understanding of how your application is working. The DevOps is a different way, practice on how things are supposed to work. This is more of your application than the environment. The DevOps look at the environment, right? And then you are looking at the application. DevOps engineer don't know about .NET, right? And DevOps engineer might not know about how, maybe they know about logs, right? But they don't know about even how the Postgres is talking to each other and everything. So what the Aspire is doing is that it's giving you the environment as a developer to then check all these things, look at all these things locally. And you can deploy this as well, production, and it's also have this, but you need to have a security best practice. The dashboard needs to be protected. Not everybody can log in, right? So that you won't expose your whole thing outside. So the whole idea is not to take the DevOps away. All these skills are going to be there, but as a developer, it gives you more skills to see what is happening behind the scene. Sometimes we remember when we deploy a certain application, we need to then go and ask the DevOps guys for access to see the logs, see what is happening. So we intentionally, another engineer is making a request, and then the senior engineers are looking at how the requests are coming in, because some of the services are failing, and we have deployed this, on staging, and we don't have access to the log, right? So if we have this Aspire locally, we can then trigger this. run all the services locally, and then check the logs and find out what is happening. So basically, DevOps is still there, but this is a tool that is solving a different problem, not basically on DevOps perspective, but helping you to run applications together, provision something that you use the Docker Compose to do. Right. So basically, that is if all your question is answered. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. You did justice, like we were properly answered in detail. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions from anyone?
I have one more, but I'll allow every other person goes just so I don't.
I think since we don't have any hands up, I think you can just go ahead with your question, please.
Yeah.
All right. So in a system where I have where services were provisioned or set up using the traditional methods, again, because that's my line of experience, we have services that already have Docker files, already have app settings or env files with connection strings and stuff like that. And I want to introduce Aspire on top of that. Does it mean that I would have to write the other services to then communicate properly with Aspire, or what would be
So
the approach for that?
Okay. One thing is that there is the way you're gonna add Aspire to an existing project, right? If you are on Visual Studio, you can even there is a new update where you only need the app host. You can then write the app host from scratch, right? But as I said, it's something that they will introduce, and it's not that stable. If you go and try it, maybe you find yourself. But it's something you can. But the point is that you don't need to write the services again. If you see here, this is not basically writing. We are not writing a lot of things, right? All we are doing is that we have this here. As I said, because of this, this builder that they have here is gonna pick everything here. So in your Docker Compose, what you need to do is that some of the things that you have in here is you are going to bring them into the app host. Let's say you have your card where you have your database, you are going to then write something like this and put it here, right? When you are done, if you have a front end, so because all the services can talk to each other from here, right? All the services can talk to each other, and all the services, all the application you have then can talk to each other here. So you don't need to then do all this connection string again, right? Maybe you have a front end somewhere, like a browser like this, which then you can do the HTTP client. But if you don't have it and it's one like all API, all you need to do is that you need to then say, hey, this has a reference to this database, this have this to this database, this services, this have this to this service, right? Just like that, and you have all of them. And because now the moment you add the app host, remember when you run your application, you run the app host. You're not going to run the individual APIs again. So the app host then said, okay, which project is here? We have an API service. Okay, we have the web front end. I'm going to run all of them. Okay, this has a service, relationship with this. This has a relationship with this. Then, as I said, when you check add reference, it then create a connection string and everything for us. So you don't need to then do all these things, right? Basically, that is very simple, right? It's gonna do the work for you. Where is it? With the project, okay. So it is gonna do the work. So you can see, as I was saying, the connection string is being created here. So they are creating the connection string here, and it will do the work for you. So you don't need to do it. All you need to do is tell the app host that, hey, this has a reference with this. So you need to look at the existing design and understand this and migrate it here. When you are done, you can then remove the Docker and the Docker Compose, and this will do the work. But your images that you have on the Docker is always going to build the same thing as well, right? So that is basically one interesting thing. It's just you understand the C# code. You don't need to understand all the complex configuration. But at the end, it's going to create a complex configuration for you, though. Right. So understand it. Maybe Docker Compose, you have Postgres, you have this, you have this, you have this. Then you are going to bring them into that post. And then you say that, okay, this one talks to this. I mean, even in .NET, if you have one solution, sometimes you add a project reference. Right? Let's say I'm building a clean architect, I can say this project reference this so that I can access some logic here. Right. So the same thing here. If this project reference this, then the logic can then be talking to each other. And how they are doing it is kind of easy, right? They have this builder like what you're gonna have in the controller, right? So then they have this distributed, which then has all these events, right? So by the time they are building it, they are looking for all this kind of stuff, right? And it's very easy to understand though, but they are looking for all the apples directory, path, all these things, some of the things that they are trying to scan and get all. So you see that they are register even most services here, right? They are register some of the things in the pipeline, right? So that everything that you're gonna add, they're gonna build. Yeah. So it's easy as that. The only thing you need is that. Yeah. I hope that one is answered. I mean, if you're not clear
Yes,
to you,
yes,
just
yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
very
yeah.
clear. Thank you so much. You did justice
Okay.
to the response. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think our time is
Yeah.
gone as well.
Time stop. Yeah. I'm really, really up.
Yeah, thank you so much, Isaiah, for the great presentation. Uh, Please, you will help us with this slide so that we can add it to the meetup for people to have access to it as well. And if this your sample is also on GitHub,
Yeah.
you can help us to share.
I'll add it a couple of I'll maybe try to add even more services to it, right?
Okay,
Catch or something like that. And I'll
okay,
explain it. I was trying to write comments to explain most of these things so that be accessible to on GitHub, and I'll share the link with you so that everybody can share with everybody to get access to it. Maybe you can do your as a starting point if you want to build it up. Maybe
okay.
you don't like maybe if you don't like this UI, you can also change it and build your own UI.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you
Okay.
so much for the
Uh,
presentation. Thank you for the time.
okay.
Uh,
Thank you so much.
for the people that joined us, thank you for the time, for joining us today. I hope you've gained one or two things from this particular presentation for today. We look forward to you joining us in the next meetup, which is going to be coming up September 29. Up until then, please keep building, uh, keep working on Aspire because I think
Yeah.
I'll also be working on it mostly now because I don't actually use it that much, but I think
Yeah, most
with this
people, because
explanation, yeah,
especially when you have existing project, but when you are
yeah,
starting new, it's possible you have to use it. It tells you.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you so much. Like I said, if you need JetBrains license, you can let me know. I still have a few licenses that they give to me. I'm not using JetBrains, I'm using VS Code, so I don't use it.
Yeah.
So
For me,
I
I
can
don't
give
also
it to
use
them.
VS Code as well. It's the opposite.
Yeah. I think I'm having some conversation maybe towards early next year. We will have some licenses from .NET to get enterprise not used
Visual
commonly.
Studio.
Yeah, Visual Studio. So I think we can have access to that for people that are still using Visual Studio. Thank you so much for the time
Yeah.
today. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And up until next time, keep building, please. Yeah,
Okay.
cheers. All right.
Thank you.